On my way out the door, after I was done doing what I was doing for the weekend, I heard these two little girls giggling on the other end of the house. And I was, it was just a shock because no one had lived there. My dad had built the place. It wasn't somebody else's house. There wasn't a house on the property before that. So where these little girls came from, there was nobody outside. The neighbors weren't home, kind of a thing. While I'm laying down, I hear this key, 11:30, in the doorknob, 3 feet away from my feet. And I froze. I was afraid of someone trying to enter the home without announcing themselves. When you've seen stuff with your own eyes and you've heard stuff with your own ears and you were there, and there's no excuse that you can come up with, how can you, if you see a car pass your house, how can you say, no, I didn't see that, I'm still a skeptic? I'm sorry, the car went by your house.
Welcome back to another episode of Retraced Echoes, where we dive deep into the world of paranormal, exploring the eerie, the unexplained, and the mysterious. Today, we've got a special guest who just happens to be at the very beginning of his journey into the paranormal research field. He is also a newcomer to the field that's kind of delving into one of the most infamous locations in New York, the Hinsdale House, also known and oftentimes said by me as the Haunted Dandy House. So please welcome Link from Link Dandy Paranormal Network. Mr. Link, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much for having me on your channel. This is a pleasure.
Hey, I couldn't have it any other way. Listen, so anyone that doesn't know, I did a interview probably, I don't know, man, it seems like forever now, probably like a month and a half ago with Paul. And the other half of Paul, we mentioned it, was Mr. Link. And I was so excited. I watched the both of them. They have this, I guess the best way you could put it's almost like a show. It's like a weekly show on YouTube.
Yeah, on Paul's channel.
But the interactions between the two is absolutely killer. I have a blast of a time watching. It keeps things interesting.
Yeah, we are rambunctious, I guess is a good word for it. Yeah.
Rambunctious is a good word.
Yeah, it's different. It's not like the normal conversations that you might hear on podcasts and things like that. We're like brothers, so it can get rambunctious. Yes.
That's half the fun, though. When you look at the grand schemes of what we do and how we do it, that's probably the absolute best part, is when things are a little spontaneous, okay? A little spur of the moment. That's the best stuff.
Yes.
Let's be completely honest.
It is. Now, I do enjoy those shows with Paul.
Now, one thing that I will say is Link, I know we're talking about Paul's channel. I'm here to talk about Link's channel today, which is Link Dandy Paranormal Network. He's also got a YouTube channel. Now, with that, you do something a little bit different than what I've noticed before in the past, Link. And basically what that is, you have been going to a location, which we're going to be covering here in a few minutes, but you go to a location that you do a lot of filming at, and then you put the unedited videos up for anyone to look at. And as we said it here once before, is the infamous Hinsdale House. Once again, the Dandy House, for those of you that love the terminology of the Dandy House. But you record in multiple rooms and put the unedited footage up, which is, I think, is absolutely amazing.
We do lives from the Dandy House in addition to static cameras. I'll usually bring between 8 and 16 cameras, and I set them up, one in almost every room, maybe 3 outside. If all goes well and the video is usable, where I didn't hook up a wire wrong or the charger may have blown out overnight and I didn't see it. But the usable footage that I get, which is usually over 1,000 hours per visit, I upload into, I try to get them into hour long. It's like a live video, but it's from a previous date. And then people that can't afford to go to these locations, because it's very expensive. And if you can't afford to go, it's you could see it online on YouTube or another format. years ago, the reason that I started doing this is years ago, the Dandy House and many, many others put up live video every other night. It seemed like, and that's how I had gotten into the paranormal field. Was I stumbled across, for example, the living room of the Dandy House on Facebook. The comment section was there, and then we ended up all being friends. And then we'd meet there numerous times. You get to know people's names and backgrounds, and then be friends outside on Facebook, outside of just the live streams. So that's basically how I got into that. Well, for some reason, a lot of the locations stopped doing these lives. So I do lives because, well, I do the static cam, and then put them up so that other people can investigate. You can hear crashes, see things going across the screen, and then they can comment on it. They can put timestamps on it. I don't have time to research every square inch of all of these videos. So it gives other people the opportunity to do paranormal research without having to spend all that money, because it is a lot of money. And then the traveling, some people, their bodies, where they can't travel. I haven't seen it anywhere else that I know of on YouTube or anywhere where people are doing what I'm doing. I just do it because I miss what the owner of the Hinsdale house used to do. I don't know if the platform closed down, but all of the places that used to do it just stopped out of nowhere. So I don't know. I think a platform out of California had closed down or something, is what I thought I heard, the rumor. So the videos that I put up on YouTube are not live, but you can still do the investigating, and you could watch behind the scenes, because we may be there and then we're going to leave to go for dinner. So then you'll hear the door close, you'll see everybody leave. And then if there's noise that's going to start, a lot of times it likes to start after we leave the house.
That's interesting.
And we get a lot of evidence that way by leaving up cameras and things when we're not there.
I remember a long time ago, there used to be a few different websites that you could go to, and some people would even go as far as they would have cameras in their own house, and you could watch their lives almost like a Big Brother is probably the best way I could put it.
Yeah.
You could legit watch their entire lives. There used to be the haunted locations. I think it's the same thing as what you're referring to, that did the same thing. And then you could watch, and then there'd be like an open chat where people could talk.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm talking about. I don't know the name of the platform that, like, for example, the haunted Hinsdale house. I don't know what platform they were using, but I got the impression it was from California, and it seemed like all of the locations that my parapeeps, if you will, the friends that you acquire over time watching these, orbs, or you see smoke coming in across the floor, which is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And in one of the places, I think it's in Kansas, where I just about fell out of my chair. I've seen and heard so many unbelievable things watching those types of videos, and a lot of us missed it. So I said, well, I told my friends, I said, well, when I got my first appointment with the haunted Hinsdale house, Dandy House, I said, I'll take videos and then post it online so that they can watch at their leisure, and it won't be to my schedule. It'll be to, they can just watch it whenever they have time.
I think that's amazing. I think that's a great idea. I've never seen it at this kind of level before. Like I say, I used to watch those old shows, or I guess they were like streams. They're not really shows. Anyone that doesn't know, I'm an animal lover. There was also a stream that used to be of this. It was a squirrel, and they had like a house attached to the window, and you could watch this squirrel. And I would tune in every day just to see what was happening with the squirrel.
Oh, wow. Yeah. When that first came out, I think people were doing it for money.
Yeah, they were.
Yes. And I think they made a lot of money, but I don't know if they put the kibosh on that, or.
It's probably a weird thing where a lot of people's doing almost like a voyeuristic is probably the best way I could put it.
Yeah.
there might have been like legalese to some of that, and it might have gotten shut down. So
Yeah, I haven't.
That's what I would think.
Yeah, I haven't seen too many lately. But I had seen them, a lot of them. You know, when you're browsing, all this stuff pops up all the time. You know, for money. So
yeah,
but.
And I think that's the way we all are to a degree. But I think Link has an amazing platform. And I think that anyone that's not looked at his channel definitely has to go. The beauty of it is in the link. I'll put a link down below for Link. Don't know how many times he's going to hear that today, but I'm going to put a link down to his channel down below. The biggest problem that I have is I never have enough time to actually stop and spend an hour watching something. Mm-hmm. But when I was on vacation, I did sort through a couple of your videos because I had free time. And the whole time I was sitting there, I'm like, did I hear something? I know I heard something. Was there something there? But then I just figured, no, I'm hearing things.
We actually have gotten one of the most recent ones was these 9 footsteps coming up the stairs. But I think we were live on that one in addition to cameras, where we were all snoring upstairs in Clara's home. And you could clearly, between the snoring, you could hear the steps that sounded like the steps that Clara described in her book. And Paul thought it sounded like it was coming up the stairs. And I had heard it, and I said that to Paul right away. I got in contact with him and said, you got to listen to this. There's a pounding noise that sounds like boots or something. And he checked with Clara, and Clara has remembered from when she used to live there. She said that's her boot guy, or the guy that she recalls when she lived there. So those types of things, when you're not live, when you're not, have a camera and you're purposely making a film, to appeal to the masses. It's like a static cam. We get so much evidence. There was nobody downstairs. We're all snoring. Maybe somebody was pounding on the house, but when you listen to the stuff over and over again and, try to decipher, you have to come to your, the best conclusion.
I think that's the big thing. I had kind of a similar idea. For anyone that doesn't know, and I know I've talked about this in other podcasts, as you guys can see, I do have relatively large mixing equipment now. That all happened after the Joe with Lindley Street. When I did his interview, there was a lot of audio problems, and I ended up going out and getting big boy mixers because I'm like, You know what? If I'm going to do this, I want to make sure I've got all the audio and the audio is as clean as possible. Mm-hmm. But when I go and start investigating, my goal is to start doing that at the beginning of next year. And then between my channel and then Nick and mine's channel, for anyone that doesn't know, Deceptive Reality is my other channel. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this mixer. It's actually battery operated, or you can put on power, but it's got 8 different mic spots. So you can plug up to 8 different mics into the mixer. So my goal is, and they're all XLR. So I'm going to run 8 different microphones to 8 different rooms, and they'll be constantly recording, and the mixer will record each channel separately.
Wow.
So the cool part about that is when I go and we're looking through, we're going to time sync everything. And from our personal cams, we're going to be wearing personal cams. We'll have cameras in different rooms, but the audio will be in every single room. So the biggest problems with a lot of channels, which goes back to what you're saying, is we don't know what's real and what's fake anymore because too many people, they're into making money. And I totally understand it. Entertainment purposes only, totally get it.
Yeah.
But for those of us like me, that I had an experience as a child and later on as a young adult, and even into probably my 20s and 30s, and even as recently as 6-7 months ago. And I want to understand what that was. So for me, I don't want the entertainment stuff is cool to watch, but I want to understand what experiences I've had. So I need to understand what's real, what's fake. So with this piece of equipment, what's cool is, let's use, for example, if I'm listening and I hear there's a knock in a kitchen, I can listen, time sync it, and I can listen to every other channel and say, was that the kitchen, or does it sound like it's close to a bedroom or close to a whatever? And then I can try to triangulate that sound. That's the goal.
Yes.
So that's kind of where mine and Nick's thought process was. We own our own websites. You guys can check out our websites, but we're going to upload every single camera, every single audio source.
That's
and similar to kind of like what Link's doing is we'll put out a heavily edited video. But if someone goes, dude, that's fake. Well, here's the original audio, the original video, find out if it's debunked.
Right.
And by doing a body cam, it's going to be put right in the center of our chest. It's going to be almost impossible when you've got such a wide field of view on those body cams for us to pull a string without you knowing, or throwing something so there's a sound. You're going to see it. You're going to hear it. So the goal for me is to say, hey, the paranormal exists. I've experienced it myself. Here's what I've discovered. And you make your own mind up. If you don't want to believe it, I totally understand. Listen, I'm a skeptic too. Now, for you, going this, I would call it a skeptical route, which I love. That's what Nick and I are also doing. I'm assuming this all came from somewhere. I mean, you're watching channels and stuff. As a child, did you have an interest in this stuff?
I had heard about it when I was younger, but I hadn't really witnessed anything. I believe the first time that I had witnessed something was, I was probably around 30. My mother had passed away, and I was at home taking care of where I used to live and her home. Cut the grass and you take care of it so it makes it look like somebody's living there, so it's less likely to be broken into while you're gone, because the family had already moved by that time. We're 30 years old. And on my way out the door, after I was done doing what I was doing for the weekend, I heard these two little girls giggling on the other end of the house. And I was I was just a shock because no one had lived there. My dad had built the place. It wasn't somebody else's house. There wasn't a house on the property before that. So where these little girls came from, there was nobody outside. The neighbors weren't home, kind of a thing. And on the way out of the door, I looked, and the only thing that came to my mind, first experience, was, well, you guys have fun over there. I gotta go now. I didn't know what to say. It was so goofy. It sounded like they were about 6 years old, like little kids playing, and these two little girls were laughing or giggling down the hall on the other end of the house. And that was my first experience. And I thought I handled it really well. I'm like, well, you guys have a good time. I got to go now because, I had to go back to where I lived so I can go to work on Monday morning. And I couldn't fart around there all night long and, mess around. I had to get going. So that was my first.
Had your mom, had she said anything about experiencing anything before?
No, never. Even back, prior to that. So it was pretty eventless, which I find very strange because a lot of people that I know, they all seem to have had, real bizarre stuff that has happened when they were a child or something. But my mom didn't, and neither did I. And my sister, I don't believe she did either. So,
something that I always mention, Nick and I talk about this from the other podcast, because occasionally we do cover paranormal, like ghost stories. We're similar to what I like to call like an unsolved mysteries. If it's an unsolved mystery, whether it be a crime or Bigfoot or a cryptid or UFO, we seem to love UFO stories, but occasionally we do trickle into the paranormal. Like we covered Enfield, we covered Roland Doe with the exorcism, or the exorcist, should I say. But one of the things that we always talk about is that a long time ago, and by that what I mean is 60s, 70s, 80s, it was almost faux pas to say anything about the paranormal. Like it's cool to watch the shows, but you don't necessarily say, well, I thought I heard a little girl laughing in the other room. Like that's not something you say. Yeah. So I think a lot of times people may have had experiences, but they didn't necessarily say something.
Okay. Now that you mention that, that's very fair statement. But on the other hand, if we didn't hear it. It was just, not that I know of. I mean, I guess anything could have happened, but whether or not I recognized it as paranormal or something, or, I didn't even think that way back then. So,
yeah, and that was your first experience.
Yeah, I was about 30, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Did you used to watch the ghost shows and stuff before it?
Just the standard ones. Like, I like Frankenstein. What is that? Sven Gulli. He's on Saturday nights. Out of Chicago, I think it is. And I met him. I had my picture with him. Like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein or something. Those goofy ones from years ago. I do like those. There's a few new ones out that are fairly good. I don't have them memorized like I would the old movies, but the new movies, I don't have time for them a lot. And when you get older, you're working and you're paranormal investigating and this and the cut the grass, and oh my Lord, you just don't have the time you used to have.
You don't have the time. Listen, we grow up, we move on. We don't have time for it all.
I know. I do try though.
So that's cool though. It's cool that you had an experience, because a lot of people, I think that's kind of similar to me, right? I had an experience as a kid, and really it was just that one moment as a kid, and then the terminology I use is it dried up until I was like 16 years old, 17 years old. And then I had another couple small experiences. And then when my grandmother passed away, similar to what you're talking about, I had an experience. And then I had a trickle of experiences for like 2 years on and off.
Wow.
And then a lot of this I've not really talked about on my podcast. Right. This is a podcast about Link, but just so you understand, that I think that's where it comes from, is you have these experiences. And at first you're like, what is this? Like, why am I having this experience? Like, what's going on? Why would this happen? And even Nick and I talk about this now on our podcast is this a case where it's residual? Is this a case where it's demonic? Is this another dimensional plane that's kind of seeping into ours? Like, there's so many questions, and we'll never be able to answer it, Right. But there's fun theories, and I think that's where the investigations come in handy, especially in a case like yours, because you're putting unaltered video out there, audio, for people to make their own conclusions on that we know is not doctored. That's the most important thing. Yeah. And that's why I tell Paul all the time, you need to put all your stories out, because once you're gone, there's no more database of your stories.
Right. And his brain, when somebody dies, your brain and everything and your experiences, you have to talk, you have to get it out while you're around. I mean, that may be a purpose that we have that we don't realize. So
I agree.
If you feel like with what you're doing, how important it is, you might not know why, but and the road takes you this way or that way, and you don't know why, but you're going to take the road because it seems right, which is what I'm doing. And it is interesting. And you have information that you have to get out. And that's what I think it's all about.
For anyone that doesn't know, I did a podcast on the Dandy House, Hinsdale House, and Paul contacted me and he goes, dude, you're doing the right thing, but the info that you're using is not necessarily correct. You've got some incorrect information. So through that, Paul and I, we've become relatively close. And, I told him, I'm like, dude, if I'm doing it wrong, then let's correct it. You come to me, let's do an interview, and let's put the story out. But again, that's such a small snippet of such a large story. And the same thing goes for you, as much as, here's the thing with Link, for anyone that doesn't know, and he's not going to say it obviously to himself. This is just an outside observation that I'm making. Link minimizes what he does to a degree. It's, well, Paul's done this and Paul's done that, but Link is just as much of this story as what Paul is at this point. Paul was the past of Hinsdale and he's rolling through. I believe people like Link will be the ones that continue to carry that story on, because unfortunately channels like mine, I hit an area and then I move on. So I tell a story and then I'm on to the next story and the next story and the next story and the next story. We need the people that's on the ground floors of these locations that's able to break it down. And I think that's what you do. You don't give yourself enough credit for that.
Tooting my own horn. I don't. I do like to put things out there, but I don't always really know how, especially the evidence that you might gather when, of course, the camera's not rolling, and that kind of stuff. That is immense at that home. When the camera's not rolling, they seem to know that you don't have the camera on, and it's crazy. That's why I got a GoPro, and I'm going to be wearing it at all times, and extensive other equipment. But I don't have this 8. What did you say? 8 microphones? I don't have that.
Yeah, mixer.
But
it's a mixer.
Yeah, I don't have that. But this and that. I'm just ordering another case because I have to have more room for the tools and equipment that I'm going to be using there when I go in October. And I am so excited about it. We've added another team member to Link and I, Kim. So she brings such wealth to the table and another perspective. But the Dandy House thing has been just an eye opener. And I knew that it was real before I got there, because I'd seen so much just online that was not explainable. And so many people call themselves skeptics. I can't call myself a skeptic. And I've also read that skeptics are smarter than people who say that they're not skeptical and that they're a believer. I read that numerous times, and I'm going to take the fall and take the heat for it. But when you've seen stuff with your own eyes and you've heard stuff with your own ears and you were there, and there's no excuse that you can come up with, how can you, if you see a car pass your house, how can you say, no, I didn't see that, I'm still a skeptic? I'm sorry, the car went by your house. You can't say that you're skeptical about cars going by your house because you saw a car go by your house. So I like to argue with Paul about a lot of things like that. And I just use my own logic that's in my own head. I don't discredit him, because if he says he's skeptical, he's skeptical. If I'm a Lutheran, I'm Lutheran. Why are people going to argue about such things? But right. I have to say, from the first time I went there, I already knew that it was real. And from my first night, I found out. So
out of curiosity, because the one thing that I am super curious about, and we don't really talk about it much from at least what I've watched on your guys' channel, is, you had this experience at 30. I'm assuming that's probably where your interest in maybe looking at some of these cams came from. Mm-hmm. Or was it just hey, these cams was there, you stumbled across it one day and started watching? Where'd the interest of that come from?
When I was 30, I think home computers was in its infancy. Yeah. And I don't think that I had a home computer at the time. But when I had gotten into the home computer in the years that came out, it just so happened to be destiny that I stumbled across Dan's live stream of the Haunted Hinsdale House. And then by watching it over and over again, I felt a connection there that I don't know why I felt that connection, but I felt that connection there. And I watched a couple other places. There was a church, there was a couple of doctors' offices and a couple other places. But the most fun that my pair of peeps and I had was when Dan had his live streams on. We were all drawn to that location. when we would watch. And that was probably in 2015, maybe. Probably 2015 to 2019, maybe 4 years straight. We would just watch and watch and watch. I'd be up at 3 a.m. and I got to go to work in the morning. That's a big no-no, you know. Yeah. But it was so intriguing, and the people were so nice, and that's how I got into the Dandy House.
And I'm assuming, because you and Paul, you guys kind of met on that, is my understanding.
Yes, I did some more digging into the haunted Hinsdale house, and I found out that Clara Dandy had written a book. And so I dug into finding her book because I wanted to read it. And then in her book, I believe she announced that Paul had a book. And I'm like, okay, here's another book. I don't believe it. And Paul, having been there so often with Clara, trying to help her through, help her family through, when I found out that I have an emergency alert on my phone, Silver. I don't know how to.
Link, you're back.
Yeah, I've turned everything off, and the emergency alert went off.
That's a red alert. That's emergency alert, man. You're not dying, are you? Is a tornado coming through? What's happening?
It's a silver alert. There's an elderly person wandering around. It didn't look like it was
Paul?
from my.
Is Paul there?
Where's Paul? I think it's in it. Where is this? Oh, I think it's in Milwaukee. It's not in my immediate area where I'm at. But anyway, I had found out about that Paul Kenyon had written a book. So then I searched and searched and searched. I could get this book and read it. And I just assumed that both of those two people, since all of this happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, you know, when they were alive and doing what they got to do, I assumed that they would have both passed away. But then I found out that Clara was still alive, and in her book she had written, you know, that she's where she's living. And then Paul had come into one of those lives, and his name was in there, Paul Kenyon in the comments, and he's being very frugal with his comments, not to attract a lot of attention. And I saw that name, and it dawned on me. I just read a book, Paul Kenyon, and so I started this cheeseball conversation. You're not the Paul Kenyon that I just read this book, and the rest is history. So I ran into him in the chat. So that's how him and I, and then I came out there to the Dandy House, and I've been going there since 2020, probably only 9 times now, but he's been there like how many times? 50,000 times. So
yeah, probably. But, there's an ungodly amount.
Yeah. But that's the only place that I go to 1 to 3 times a year.
We're going to change that, because I think Link has a calling and more than just the dandy look. Your personality alone, I think, would make for an amazing investigator, just because you kind of bring a different dynamic to it. I think Paul would do the same thing if he would leave the Dandy House, but he loves the doggone Dandy House so much, and I understand why. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it's great to have that kind of atmosphere and enjoy one location, and you guys are talking about, you know, the potential of another location that's nearby. Yeah. And I think that's a good start. Yeah. Yeah. So I think
he's never been there. And he's never been there, and it's so close to where he lives. I'm like, but he has a connection to the Dandy House because he knows the family like they're relatives, you know, and that's gold, you know.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're going to do what you know, right? Like I don't have any kind of connection to anything. So it's not like my connections was as a kid, the houses I used to live in. So for me, those aren't really haunted houses like they are, but they weren't. But something that's always interesting too, is I believe that part of it is the energy that goes inside the house. And we're going to be getting into obviously some of that conversation too, but I can't remember where it was either my podcast or it was mine and Nick's podcast. I can't remember, but we talked about the fact that when I was a kid, my grandparents' house we thought was extremely haunted. Just because, similar to what you're talking about, there'd be footsteps going up and down the stairway, and you knew there was nobody on the stairway. And when my grandparents moved out, we always assumed the next owners would have the same experiences, but we had heard through channels that they didn't have that experience at all.
Wow. So
you have to question how, and I remember as a kid hearing the footsteps and hearing things moving. Oh yeah, 100%. I remember it literally, and back then I was probably so small, when they lived there, I was real young. Mm-hmm. But I remember it like it was yesterday because it kind of scared me, but it intrigued me at the same time.
It should be horrifying. Well, I know it's horrifying if you're alone in a house and you would hear that. Yeah. That's just it. I don't even know what the word is, but when you're alone in a place like that, it is terrifying. It really can be.
I truly believe that any location can be haunted. And a lot of people say, well, why would you say that? Like, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And I'll explain why. For me, I've had these experiences, and part of it could be the energy of the person too. I believe that it could be a series of different things. But when I was, I don't know, I probably had experiences through my 30s, and then I kind of shut it off a little bit because I started going to church. And the one thing that they said at church is, well, that's demonic. You don't want to do that. And I'm like, oh God, well, I can't do that then. So I started shutting things off. I started shutting my brain off to it. If I heard something or saw something, I'd go, you don't exist, get away. And eventually that did happen.
Really? Okay.
And when I started this podcast up with Nick and we started doing Unsolved Mysteries, I had zero experiences when I was older. And by older, I mean 40, 41, 42, and we started the podcast, and in October we do a thing called a listener special. And what people could do was they wrote in to us and they gave us the ghost stories, and then we rewrote the ghost stories, and then we created these narratives with sound effects and music, and it was just a fun way of retelling everyone's story.
All right.
And we started this probably, 3 weeks, maybe a month before Halloween. And we release an episode on Halloween, and we release an episode on Christmas. Wow. Now understand, when my wife and I, when we purchased our home, we were the second owner, and it was a relatively new build. So, my house was not that old. We started getting all these stories in, and I started writing all the narratives, and I started having fun with it. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, our ceiling fan would just turn on randomly. And I didn't figure this out for a few days. Like, it took me, I bet I didn't know it for a week. And I just always assumed my kids was turning the ceiling fan on. And
with the remotes?
We do have a remote, only one remote. There's only one way to turn a fan on, and that's with the remote. Our remote is attached to the wall, but you can take it off the wall and you can carry it anywhere. Okay. We just leave it on the wall. Yeah. And what gave me the aha moment that this is happening is I came home, I walked into the kitchen, and I came back out, and my daughter goes, "Why do you keep turning on the fan?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, "Why are you always turning on the ceiling fan when you come home?" And I said, "I'm not turning on the ceiling fan. What are you talking about?" And then I had the aha moment. I go, "Oh, wait. Okay, they're not doing this. I'm not doing this. My wife is downstairs working. She's not doing this. Maybe it's the fan," because it was a relatively brand new fan. This isn't an old fan. We maybe had the fan for 2 weeks before that.
Oh.
So the first thing I thought was, oh, cool, we got a smart fan, and the smart fan just kicks on for whatever reason. So again, the skeptical side of me is like, well, this just doesn't exist, right? It's not a big deal. It's not paranormal. I would start working because for anyone that doesn't know, I recorded a podcast, mine and Nick's show. I go upstairs, and on a laptop, I used to edit all the videos. I used to master my audio there. And as I'd be laying on the couch and editing, the fan would kick on. And I'm like, that is so wild. Like, how is this happening? So again, I would always try to deny it as well. Maybe there's something going on with the fan. My wife got so nervous about it, she started turning the switch of the fan off so it couldn't come on.
Okay.
Because she didn't like it. It was very disconcerting, to say the least. So my father-in-law was in town. It was right before Halloween. We was finishing everything up. My son was going to be, I think it was like a large dinosaur, but it was one of those that has the built-in fan. You turn the fan on, it blows the outfit up, right? Kind of makes it look big.
Yes.
Well, he broke the fan on it on Halloween night before he goes to get candy. So I'm like, I can fix this. I'm the dad. I can make this happen. Mm-hmm. So I'm sitting there and I'm piecing all together. And what happened was the spindle of the fan came off of the actual metal. So I'm sitting there with Gorilla Glue and trying to get it on. And he's got the suit kind of on and I'm fastening it in. And there's a switch. There's like a power box. And I said, hey, turn on the fan. And within 2 seconds, our upstairs or our ceiling fan came on. And I looked at my son, and my father-in-law looks at me and he goes, did that just happen? And I said, yeah, that just happened. And I walk over to the ceiling fan and I turned it off. But right after I said it, it happened. But I was talking about the fan on the costume, not our house.
Right.
So that's really when I had an aha moment and I go, wow, that's crazy.
And there's you don't have to clap. No. You don't have, it's not.
I tried everything.
Alexa or whatever, turn the fan on so it turns on.
Well, and I was talking to Nick about this because I told Nick, I'm like, you're never going to believe this because we talk about this stuff all the time. And I just sound like I'm crazy. I'm like, but let me run this by you. And he said, well, let's pull up the model of the fan that you have. And I'm like, dude, it's brand new. Like, I don't even know what it is. So we went, I got the manual and I took a photo of the model. It's not Wi-Fi. It does not connect to the internet.
Okay.
The only thing that they said was that if your neighbors have the same identical fan, if they turn their fan on, it could additionally turn yours off. Or turn it on, depending on what they do.
With the remote?
With the remote.
Oh.
But I looked at the distance, and the distance, it's too far.
Oh.
It wouldn't have reached. So we debunked that too. So now in my household, we don't turn the fan on. The switch is always off. The switch is always off. Now, I will say since then, I've had 2 experiences that is questionable at best. One of which is I was recording a podcast that was kind of spooky. Usually when I do the podcast, I think it's cool, but there's some stories that kind of get to me a little bit and I'm go, man, that's kind of creepy. And I went upstairs. My wife was out of town. I can't remember what it was. She was out of town for, I think it was business. And my kids was gone. So it was basically me. And I went upstairs and I always feed the dog. I let the dog out. And when I went upstairs, a door was open on the cabinet where my kids would never get into. And I didn't think anything of it. I just passed it and closed it. And then I let the dog out and I came back downstairs. And then I came back upstairs and did a few things. And before I went to bed, I went back in the kitchen. The door was open again. And there was no rhyme or reason. And that's the only time that has happened in all of this. So the reason that I bring this entire story up is I know that there was nothing on this land before. We are the second owner of their house, and the first owners, we bought it from them. They did not pass away. But the moment that we started talking about all these paranormal things on my podcast, things started escalating in my own house. So There is the theory that, maybe it's a parapsychology, right? Maybe it's something that I'm deflecting from my mind that's causing this stuff to happen. I'm not a big component of that. Like they talk about children with psychokinesis.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I don't know that I believe that either. But is it a case where you open up something and then it allows certain energies to come in? And that's where I really kind of question things.
It is probably the more likely of the reasonings. For example, the first night that I stayed at the Haunted Hinsdale house, I had brought a buddy of mine as a grip because I had so much equipment, and the help is unbelievable because there's so much equipment, and to set it up and to run it, make sure it's working right, batteries, the whole spiel. And he was sleeping already, of course, and I was getting ready to go to bed my first night there, and it was a little nerve-wracking, but I had read the books. I'd read Clara's books 27 times. I think I read Paul's book 27 times. And Paul's book is huge. Clara's book, that's a good book. Paul's book is great, but it's long. So
it's very long.
Yes. I had it memorized, and I'm like, okay, how come nothing's happening to me here? I've been here 12 hours. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop. So I lay down on the bed, Mike's bed, which is, for those of you who have been to the Haunted Hinsdale house, it's right next to the front door in the front porch. And just laid down, exhausted from a 10-hour drive, exhausted from setting up for 10 hours. And my grip is already sleeping. And no, we weren't going to separate. There's just two beds in Mike's room. They're like separated by 3 or 4 feet in the middle. They put an extra bed in Mike's room on the side where his dresser was. And then I had Mike's where his bed was when the Dandies were there. I just get laid down and pull one cover over because it was a balmy night. It wasn't too bad. And while I'm laying down, I hear this key, 11:30, in the doorknob, 3 feet away from my feet. And I froze because I was afraid of someone trying to enter the home without announcing themselves. The key noise sounded like sticking a key in the keyhole for about 7 to 15 seconds. I was so in shock at what I was hearing right outside the door, 3 feet from my feet on that end of the bed is right around the corner is the doorknob. Right after the 7 to 15 seconds of that stopped. And then the doorknob went like this, chink, 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 chink. And if you know what a doorknob sounds like that's locked, talk about gonna have a heart attack. But then, because all I thought was a human being that, to me, maybe more harm than a ghost flying through or an entity. So I immediately thought to myself, sensible. And if you've been to the Haunted Hinsdale house, there's this front porch and the floor is wood. You come in the porch door and then you have to clomp, clomp, clomp over the wood to get to the front door. And it had dawned on me, there was no noise of somebody coming in the locked porch door, nor walking across the porch floor to get to the front door. So I said, oh, it's a ghost, or it's an entity. And I said, oh, that's to be expected. And within 10 seconds, I was out like a light. when I realized where I am. And well, yeah, I read these books. I'm here. That's to be expected. I was a little irritated that I had drove 10 hours and then I set up for 10 hours. I'm exhausted. And you pulled this on me when I want to lay down. I was a little irritated with that. And then when I woke up in the morning, 10 huge scratches on between the glute and the thigh, a burn mark about the size of a pencil, probably right there. And then teeth marks, like if you had dentures and you pushed the denture into your hand, it was a U shape like this, a U shape. Now, if I was to stick my hand in my mouth, the U shape would be this way, but I can't get my hand in my mouth, of course, but it would be this way. The indentation, like somebody took dentures, but my grandmother had them from years ago. I remember what they looked like. It looked like somebody had pressed dentures into my hand. And this mark was on my body after I woke up for about 3 hours. And the 10 scratch marks that looked like someone took a deck screw or a nail, with a sharp end and just drew 10 lines. They were probably 4 inches per line, equally spaced. And I was, what is this pain? And all I thought was, oh my God, nobody's going to believe me. And so I quickly snapped a picture. I forgot to get a picture of this and I forgot to get a picture of that. But I just shook my head in the morning. And of course, my grip didn't have anything, didn't hear anything, didn't see nothing, didn't have a mark on them. But that was my first experience at the Dandies. And how do you get teeth marks? It'd be like shoving your hand in your mouth this way. Because it was like that. And then a burn mark right on my lip, and I was surprised those went away right away. But the mark on my leg, the 10 scratches that were like nails. Now, my nail, I don't have nails. They're like flat, and so if you were to go against your skin, you just make these wide red marks. You don't make like a nail. You take a nail and go on there. It's just like using a knife. It's more rough though, because it's not as smooth as a knife. But a nail would make that type of marks that I had. And so I put that picture on Paul's Dandy House page on Facebook and a couple other places. Of course, everybody, there's so many people that have those types of pictures out there for money that no one believes it. But I don't know what to say. I woke up with it. I didn't do it, and it's not for money. It's look at this. So that was my first experience, which was a hoot.
And the sad part is, again, I know I keep referring back to Nick, but Nick and I have had this conversation. I believe that, and this is my theory, this doesn't come from anyone else. This is just my Bert's quirky thought processes. Okay. I believe that we're interdimensionally locked, and that whereas as humans, we got to look similar to talking about the dentures. I don't know that they're dentures. I believe they're interdimensional, so they can slide between our skin and bones or like walls. Like how many times do you hear, well, I watched the ghost walk through the wall? Well, there's a wall for me and you.
Right.
There may not be for them.
Right.
I've heard it. Well, ghosts are floating. I don't know that they're floating. Their dimension may be slightly higher than ours or lower than ours.
Exactly.
So what we see is just what's kind of morphing into our area. So whereas he may have been just, I say he, whatever it was, if it's trying to bite you, it doesn't need to worry about getting a perfect angle. It's going to bite you the way that it bites you.
Right.
And I hear it said all the time. People go, well, why didn't you get a photo of this? Or why didn't you get this happened? And you're such in shock when that moment happens. And you're like, what am I looking at? First off. And then the moment that you do realize it, it's typically gone. Like I've had some paranormal experiences also where I've seen it or I've heard it. And in the length of time that it takes me to figure out is what I'm seeing or hearing real, it's done.
Right.
So that moment has passed. Also, he's talking about Paul's book. For anyone that doesn't know, that's Paul's book. So yeah. As you can see, it's a little pages. Yeah, you're going to be reading. You're going to be reading for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's always the thing. People they say, and I hear it a lot, no matter what it is, UFOs or ghosts, spirits, demons. Well, why didn't you get a photo? And I'm sitting here thinking, if you see something and in the back of your mind, you're going, what am I looking at? And then you're trying, in your case, I'm sure you were like, did I do this somehow? Was there something that caused this for me? Like, did I get up against the bed? Where did these scratches? Oh my goodness. Now I've got scratches on my thigh. Oh man, my lip feels, I got this burn. And you're just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yes. And run to the mirror in the bathroom. And you're just trying to grasp it, because I was explained one time that your brain is like a Wurlitzer jukebox, and you're trying to find the file and and it's not there because this is new, or you're trying to match it up with something that it's not, which is pareidolia. And so, but yeah, Dan and I were there in the backyard, and we were taking a rest. He had visited on one event when I was there by myself, and he was doing a program because he does shows for with Nick Ruff and some other people, and he was in the area, and he called me up knowing that I'm there by myself, and he said, do you mind if I bring some people over, because they'd never seen the house? I'm like, yeah, I'm here all by myself. Yeah, come over. It's like 11 at night, and I was, it's nerve-wracking up there when you're by yourself. It is not easy, but you can do it. It's just oh man, I don't even know. I don't have the words for it. You have to do it yourself to know what I'm talking about. But we were outside in the backyard, and it was dark, 11:30 at night, and the light was coming through from the kitchen window over the sink area, and then there's a back door with 3 windows in the door, and one's here, and one's here, and it was coming through both the kitchen window and then the back door. And so the kitchen window had drapes over it, white cotton, so that light was not shining onto the grass, but the door was. The 3 not horizontal, the 3 rectangles lights into the grass, from the ceiling of the kitchen going through the door and onto the grass. And Dan and I are outside in pitch black. It is so black out there. You can't, 5 feet in front of you can't, there could be somebody standing there and you wouldn't see it. But of course you'd see the light on the grass. And he's waiting for the lady that he had brought in to come down from the gifting tree. And the man that he had brought was right 20 feet behind him with a camera out near the front door where the lights are by the front door. And he was going around, he was like going in a circle with his camera. He was in plain view of me. Dan was right behind me. I'm sitting in a lawn chair taking a break without the camera, without any equipment. And the lights on the ground that were coming through the back door, the 3 windows in the back door, had gone black and then turned back on. And I'm like, oh, maybe that lady who he brought, maybe she passed the back door. Maybe she was in the kitchen and passed the back door and then blocked him. and then went into the bathroom because the bathroom is right next to the back door. And he said, "Did you see that?" And I thought, wait a minute. Why is he lowering? Why is he talking a little bit softer? Because we were talking before that, and he lowered his voice, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably your lady friend. You know, she's probably in the house going to the bathroom. She passed the back door. He says, well, it's possible, but she's up by the gifting tree. And my eyes popped out of my head, and I'm like, your guy is over there, you're here, I'm here taking a break, your lady's up all by herself, is what I thought. And then he said, yeah, she's all right, she got a flashlight. And then she was coming down the stairs. Just there's steps that he put in this side of the hill because it's so steep. She was just coming down with her flashlight at the time. And I'm like, oh, you guys get to leave and I got to stay. Oh, okay. Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Link's getting a hotel room for the evening.
And I know I wanted to, but I didn't. And then the storms were coming in, the lightning storms and everything. That was one heck of a night. But that's when you don't have your camera on. I was taking a break. I was sitting outside. Because they had come over, they had toured the inside. Then we all went outside, and I'm like, I'll go outside too and get a break, you know. Sure enough, the light from but the light. What I didn't say was the light that was in the kitchen window over the sink that didn't dim. So if somebody would have turned the light off in the kitchen, you know, both the lights on the ground, you know, the three rectangles, and the kitchen window would have dimmed. But just the three lights out of the back door windows through the back door that are mounted in the back door. Yeah. So, and I did ask him if it's happened before, and he did admit to me that, yes, it has happened before. Things like that when they were having camp outs and things like that. So I was just lucky enough to witness it firsthand. And unless he lied to me the whole time and snuck a third person in, which he didn't, you know, he wasn't lying, you know, he didn't do that. It's real. So
see, and I think a lot of people, they assume that if we're talking about ghosts, there's going to be some kind of grandiose thing that's going to occur, right? There's like, okay, well, they're not going to do X, Y, and Z. It's going to be something big, like they're going to manifest, and then, you know, it's going to be like this skeleton thing. I'm going to do something that I've never done. I'm going to tell a story I've never told to show how minuscule some of this paranormal stuff can be. Okay. You know, I've talked about some of the activity that's been occurring recently in my house, relatively recently. This is going to sound like the dumbest paranormal story that anyone can have, but it's funny also. So at nighttime, I put earphones in, like the ones that run flush with your hair or your head, just on the inside. Now, typically what I do is I throw on old radio Twilight Zone and I fall asleep to it. So usually what happens is I only put it in one ear, so that way I can hear if I need to wake up or something happens or the kids yell or, you know, I've got that one ear open. So what happens is I wake up the next morning. I don't move much in bed. I'm kind of I go to sleep and I'm a deep sleeper. I go to sleep quick and I'll wake up on time, but I move enough to where the earphone will typically pop out of my ear. And then the next morning I got to look around and find it. Which is not, I've been doing this for years.
Really? Wow.
Within the last 4 or 5 months, I've got these big pillows and I started losing the earphones. And I'm like, it can only be on the floor, in the bed somewhere, underneath a cover. Like there's not many places that an earbud can go. Like there's just not.
Yeah.
And they're El Cheapo. Yeah, they're just they're little Temu earbuds, right? Like you got maybe $8 invested in these things and they're Bluetooth and not a big deal. One day I literally tore everything up because I'm like, by the time I order another Temu, you better sponsor me for this podcast. But I was like, with Temu, you got to wait like what seems like eternity. Like it's a long time to get whatever the package is. And I'm like, it's going to be a month for me to get these stupid headphones. So let me try to find this one that I've got. So I'm looking and looking, couldn't find it. That night, I was fluffing my pillow and I start feeling it's inside my pillow. You know, you got the pillow and you got a cover over your pillow, right?
Yes.
So I slide my hand all the way to the back of the cover and it's laying inside there. And I'm like, that's so wild. Like, how did it get back there? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I just played it off. I'm like, that's weird. And then I put it back in the thing to charge and I put the other one in and I slept. A week goes by. And then I lost it again. And again, I'm looking all over for it. I'm not thinking to look in that pillowcase. I'm just not thinking of it. That night, I was sitting there and I put my hand in there and there it is in my pillowcase. And I'm like, and it's all the way to the back. It's not the front. So it's not like it fell off and kind of rumbled. That's where I would think.
Right.
It's all the way in the very back underneath it. This kept happening. Sometimes it would happen in a week, 3 or 4 times. And it was always inside my pillowcase. So eventually I'm like, maybe somehow, and I've never done this my entire life, but maybe I'm sleeping and doing it. Like maybe I'm taking it out and putting it into the pillow and it's me, you know? So I'm like, that's crazy. So one morning we end up getting up. My wife, I got up and then couldn't find my earpiece and I started laughing. I'm like, it's going to be in this pillowcase. Watch. And I put my hand in there and I ran all around. It wasn't there. And I'm like, oh, well, nope, I'm wrong. It's somewhere else. It's got to be on the floor or something. We're laughing about it because I keep telling her it's in this pillowcase. She doesn't believe me. So I lay the pillow back down and then I go and I'm like, I don't have time right now. I'll look for it this evening before I go to bed because I'm going to wear the other one.
Right. So you got some time to play.
I got plenty of time to play with it. So that evening I'm going to bed. I put the other one in. I look underneath the bed with a little flashlight and I'm like, I don't know where it went. And so right before I lay down, I'm like, there's no way it'd be in there. I already checked it while Jess and I was sleeping, put my hand in and it's right there. It's right in the pillowcase, between the pillowcase and the pillow. And I ran my arm all the way around it when she and I was sitting there. And I told her the next day and she was like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. It's so minuscule. Yeah. It's so minuscule. And a lot of people wouldn't be like, well, and even I was like, maybe I'm doing it in my sleep and I don't even know it. But the fact that I looked in the one spot where it always is, it's not there. 12 hours go by and I look again and it's there, tells me that unless I just completely missed it, which is possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. Yes. It's very unlikely. Very unlikely. Right. But again, that's not something that I'd be like, hey, this is paranormal, but it can't be anything else. Like as dumb as that sounds.
Clara had said on numerous occasions, she would put her purse one place when she went to bed. And then the next time it would be downstairs in the bathroom. Apparently they had the water heater in the bathroom back then. And it was sitting right by the water heater. And she doesn't do that. And the kids aren't going to be messing around with their money. And her husband was off in Buffalo working. You know, maybe she slept walked, you know, but it's not likely, but I guess it's possible. But yeah, she has, the same kind of a thing over and over again. I'm trying to think if I've had anything misplaced. Well, the nothing really moved lately, but I went outside a week ago, which coincides with Paul's recent goings on at his home that he had told me about this past week. But I went outside on one of these evenings after work, and my roommate has a dog, and I have a dog, and that dog wanted to go outside with me. So I'm like, okay. Now I just got to watch it. And I'm trying to come down after work, and you sit in the lawn chair and let the dog goes out. And the front, for lack of a better word, veranda, where the entrance to the home is, it's got like this wall, a raised wall where you could put fake flowers, you could plant real flowers, whatever. It's probably 20 feet long. So the dog comes out with me, and then I'm watching it walk. I'm to the left, the door is over here, and I'm watching it walk over to the grass over to my right. And a minute or two goes by and no one's home. All the windows and doors are locked. The air's on, except for the door that I came out of, because you could be sitting in the front of your house and be broken in from behind your house. Not that there's anybody back there, but it's just good way to live. You keep things locked, I heard this, and so I turn around and hear the dog is in the house, in the glass storm window, looking at me like it want to come out. So I'm like, oh my. Clara had this too. Dogs go in and out when they didn't do it. So I let the dog out again. And I'm like, I got to tell everybody at work about this, because the same, Clara had that too. The dogs are either out, they're supposed to be in, or, vice versa. So yes, it's those tiny, for sure, those small things. What you just let the dog out.
To hear that.
I know,
but no one ever wants to hear it. That's the crazy part. But see, for me, that's the most riveting thing. Like that little earbud.
Yeah.
As dumb as that sounds, there's no explanation for it.
I know.
And I go, that's cool, but it's scary too, because I'm like, I'm sleeping when this is happening.
I know.
And it's creepy. So
when you go to the Dandy house, don't even think about it, because when and you know what so many people they think that there's some kind of safety in Mike's room, in Mike's bedroom, but he had the dancing furniture, he had the games and things falling off on him from the shelf above, on and on and on. That's one of the rooms with the most activity, but because I think it's psychological, because he was male, that, I'm going to sleep in Mike's room, because Mary's room had all that, and Laura's room had some stuff. Clara had stuff in her room. So they all want to run to Mike's room for like, that'll be protective there, and no, it's not. So
that's a hot spot too, baby.
Yes, it is. It's real. Yeah, it is. That place is where I have been going, but you were right. We're looking at another place right down the road in Salamar, I think it's called, the town right near there. So I'm really excited about it. Going somewhere else. And
well, for sure, yeah, because you always want to know, well, this is the activity I had here.
Right.
Am I going to have a similar experience somewhere else, or is it going to be different?
Yeah. No.
And like I told Nick, when we go, because what I want to do, for whatever reason, I've determined that for our very first investigation, I want to do the Hinsdale house. But what I told Nick is maybe we could do the Hinsdale on a Friday and then do that house on like a Saturday.
Okay.
So do two houses back to back.
Right.
And then bring everything home. And, you're going to be going through that footage for months.
Yes.
Piecing it together. And building an entire story,
It's a lot.
No one understands that. Yeah. I mean, people laugh because I talk to people and I'm like, I do this podcast. They watch it and they're like, well, that was 30 minutes. Like, how long did it take you to do it? Like a couple hours? I'm like, yeah, no. Each podcast is usually 12 to 15 hours, and that's for 30 minutes, Right. So people just don't understand it. But when you have hours of footage, I mean, that's crazy.
Will you have a helper or anything to help set up, or can you streamline it so it's, fairly quick?
that's the hope. Like by having the mixer where all the audio goes into one spot. And then Nick and I will have lavaliers that's electronic, which will also plug into the mixer. So technically, it'll be able to record all of our lavaliers. It'll have mics in all the spots. So I'll be able to piece it all together in one place. So that'll be easy. The problem is setting up the cameras. And what I think we're going to do, I've got 2 360 cameras that I'm going to set up in just the houses to where it's a full 360. And another thing that Nick and I talked about is mounting a 360 on us and then walking around when we're doing the tour and live streaming it. So people on their phones could scroll if they hear something. Yeah. So that's kind of where my thought process was on that.
That's cool. Yes.
So,
I've seen those.
We're
they
trying
can do it
to
at
adapt
home.
it. Yeah, and we're always trying to adapt the thought process because I feel like it's been done. Like a lot of things have been done over and over and over. It's repetitive. And a lot of it, like you and I have talked, a lot of it's entertainment purposes only. But we don't want entertainment purposes only. Like we want to say, we had this experience. You can see it. This is what it was. And by live streaming it, especially with a 360, someone may see something we don't see.
Right. Yeah.
We're looking in front of us and it's behind us. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that might be a little creepy. Because think about it. Like recently you guys did your like a live stream when you guys was there last, in which I'm going to graciously acquire some of the footage to put so people can get an idea of what you guys did. I'm going to sweet talk Paul and see if I can get a little bit of it so they can kind of see you guys in action. But in that one, think about if you would have had a 360 camera that you could have panned.
Yeah.
I mean,
you mean they can pan at home while they're watching?
Yeah. Or even when you're recording, because if you're recording it also, because like a prime example, Paul, when he was blindfolded, no one else was in there. You could hear the sounds, but if you had the capability of scrolling, you could see, was this something in front of him? Something that was behind him? Maybe it was to the left or the right.
Right. And all we had was the camera on him.
Right. The cell phone camera. Yes.
Yes.
But like, that's the kind of adaptation that I want to do is have 2 4K 360 cameras. I mean, that's genius.
Wow. That is good.
But no one does it because they want the entertainment videos. I don't want those. I want people to go, oh crap, I just saw this. What was that? Oh, it's a 360 camera that he can't manipulate.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that too.
That's what I want.
Yeah. He was so mad at me, by the way. That one was hilarious. He was so mad. We were all down. We were all outside, and there was Paul's phone that he swears up and down his life on. It's an Android that's superior to my Apple. During his 30-minute investigation, it kept cutting out. Then the people who were listening, who me, I'm supposed to run if I need to, are watching it downstairs on my own cell because he's transmitting. It's 10-second delay, not 10-second delay. So he's cutting out, and there's the delay. So I didn't know that he was panicking, if you will, because I saw him. He was panicking, and after the fact, I think he had that marks on his hands for about a week because he was trying to get out of that chair. That's how bad it was. And I felt bad because he was cutting out on his cell, which never happens, and there's a delay. So when we finally realized, I think he's in trouble, and boom, then I come up the stairs, which I didn't want to scare him, but I, had to come up the stairs. That's why it took me so long to get up there, because there's all the trouble that we were having. But as Kim mentioned, no, we used his cell phone for all of those investigations. No one else had trouble with cutting out like he did. So
yeah,
he's got a connection with that house. It's a love-hate relationship, if you ask
facts.
me.
Facts.
So,
He absolutely does.
Yeah, it's a love-hate.
Now, I know with you, obviously, having done the Hinsdale investigations at this point, you've obviously heard things. You've been, I mean, for lack of better terms, you've been touched by things. You got the scratches on you, the biting that has occurred. The one thing that I think most people look at and they go, you have to have this experience for paranormal. Have you seen anything with your own eyes where you go, well, that's weird? Besides the lights. Well, obviously we understand the lights.
One is at the tip of my tongue and I saw it afterwards. But I just want to say that one. A couple of years ago, there were balloons in Clara's room and they were on top of this makeshift closet, like a material plastic closet. And the balloons would move about 8 inches, like in a half circle, and move forward and then move back and then move back that way. They had this real bizarre movement that if it was wind coming from a certain direction, I could see the balloon, maybe coming and going if the breeze is coming and going, but not also incorporating a turn and a stop and then go back. The movement of it was very suspicious. But have I seen? I have never seen an apparition walking through a room. I don't know if I'd pass out or tell them to sit down and have a soda. Sure. I've never seen, but everybody seems to have seen this stuff. I've heard more things than seen. I've never seen stuff flying across the room. In the Dandy house, Phil Dandy saw a book floating in him and Clara's bedroom when he ran up one night just before they were going to leave the home. And the book was floating. I have never seen something floating. Nothing like that. So I don't know if I'm being spared the horrific events, and just hearing so much that's astronomical. But I'm not seeing things other than, like the light on the ground going out. The lights in the living room will flash when I'm sitting in there. And when a couple of younger people are sitting in there that we have brought with. And then when somebody else is sitting in there, they don't flash anymore. They off and on, off and on, off and on. And it's very irritating because you can say, yep, look what's happening. And then, the naysayers say, oh, that's just the house electricity. And then you get up and walk out and it goes away. And then, or when it's just time to go to bed, it's 11 at night or 2 in the morning. It doesn't matter. Quiet, 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 quiet. So everybody's getting ready to go to bed. And all of a sudden there's this gigantic crash downstairs in the living room and everybody's upstairs. And we're getting so used to hearing these crashes and booms and bangs and whatnot. We don't even run anymore and go look to see what it is. And we have to do that. We have to go look, even though maybe that's what the entity wants us to do. But it seems like we're getting so immune to it or so used to it, almost like Clara. When she heard the steps downstairs, she wouldn't bother running down there anymore because every time you go downstairs, the noise is upstairs. So it's like you're just running in circles.
Yeah.
And you never see.
Sense.
Yeah, and you never see a big cabinet tipped over, or a refrigerator tipped over or something. You don't never see anything for the noise you heard. So Paul and I just last time we heard a big crash, we both laughed, and I was being somewhat sarcastic. What are we supposed to do? Go scream, and go, oh, and run downstairs with the camera because we're not going to see anything. But
right,
I don't know if we're getting immune to. I don't know. I wish there was somebody you could talk to about this kind of stuff, but I don't want to, talk to a shrink about it or a psych or something. But I don't know who else to talk to about it. But yeah, I know. Lock me in a room, throw away the key. But yeah. No, I mean, it's not just me that hears this stuff, and there's others. So I know I'm not crazy, and that's cool. But I think we're getting immune to it.
Out of curiosity, I know the Hinsdale house, or, I feel bad saying Hinsdale house because after knowing Paul so long, I call it the Dandy house.
I can't. That one was a hard one for me to wrap around. Also, why did it have two names? So it was very difficult for me when I first. But anyway, what were you gonna?
It's one of those things that we kind of deal with, I guess, at this point. I call it both, so I usually call it by both names. Now. Yes. There, I know, is a little bit different than probably what the normal quote unquote haunting would be. Do you think that from your standpoint, when it comes to that residence, do you believe it's residual partially? Do you believe that is demonic? Do you think that is what some people would call elementals? What do you think yourself personally, taking everyone else out of it? I don't care what anyone else thinks. What does Link think this is?
I think it's a combination of everything that you just said, because it could be residual with the noises, for example. It could be, but I always bet whoever's with me that after we get ready for bed, it's going to ramp up, and it always does. So the way I see it is, I don't believe that can be residual, because if it's residual, I think, I don't have a master's on the subject, but it should be anytime and all the time. If it's residual, it shouldn't be waiting for us to go to bed, no matter if it's 11 or 2 in the morning. It always ramps up after we go to bed. And then there's the times when it's spot on. I've witnessed people screaming to the home, and it's immediate response from the house, from the entity. That cannot be residual, but it can't all be living entities in their own realm, just waiting for a fight and waiting to pick on. It can't just be that. So I think that it is so complicated for the human to understand, because science, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't even want to admit that it exists, because science can't prove it. And if science can't prove it, then it doesn't exist. Okay. So that's wrong. If you've been around, you know that that's wrong, because evidence shows otherwise. So, but I can't say that it's just the one, that it's residual. It has to be. I think it's living in its own realm. But
yeah, I've had enough time with you and Paul that, like, when you tell the stories about the key and the door lock, I go, that has to be residual. Like,
it could
it's
be,
not doing that for you. You know what I'm saying?
I thought it was doing it for me because I talked to it when I was going to bed. I said, yeah, I've been here all these hours. I'm up for 22 hours. Let me guess. And then 5 minutes later, I laid down and peekaboo.
You know, that could be then. It may not be residual in a case like that.
There's been people seen there as real people, humans. Paul and I am not sure that I have seen it, because when I'm there are so many people that come to the house. And from what I've read, I don't assume that they're human. I assume that they're either a figment of my imagination, or they're a ghost, or maybe they're human. So when we were leaving one day to go out to dinner, we were packed in this 2024 black Suburban, biggest thing on earth. We're driving down the dirt road, and sure enough, there's this blonde boy off on the side of the road where nobody lives, sitting there on the side of the road, like everybody else says. It could be one of the people who had passed away a long time ago, and many people have allegedly seen this person. And we're going to dinner, and he looked so real, but out of place, sitting on this concrete that's there. There's no house around there. There's no bus stop. There's no reason for him to be there. But I didn't have the gall to stop the vehicle and ask him if he needed help and investigate. I just assumed he was real, because everybody says that these people they see on the roads and that come up to the Dandy house look just like you and me. It's in books. It's been noted for years. So I don't know what you call that, if that is a residual.
Yeah, I've always had a tough time, because I've heard so many stories where they talk about, people seeing whatever this entity is, whether it be ghost, spirit, whatever it may be, but they refer to them as transparent. Prime example.
And they're
for
not,
the podcast. Yeah, for me, they've not been. Like, I've seen multiple at this point.
Okay.
But they've never been transparent for me. They would look like you or me. Now, when I was a kid, there was someone who wore clothes that didn't make sense to me. And I'm like, why is this stranger in my house but wearing those kind of clothes? Like, I couldn't quite, as a kid, I couldn't piece it together. Now, as time went by, we discovered that was probably my great-grandmother, which would now, looking back on it as an adult, I can go, okay, well, that would make sense why the clothes didn't fit in my mind. You know what I mean? But like a prime example for you guys, if maybe haven't seen this, because I believe I'm going to release this podcast after the Bel Air podcast that I just did the week before. You guys are going to want to check that out. Kristen Lee, in her book, spoke about a entity that she saw. She was sitting on her couch with her dog. She had fallen asleep because she was in the kind of the renovation stages of the house. And when she woke up, on the other end of the couch was a man that she said was borderline transparent, but he was black and white like an old television show. And she said she screamed. And when she screamed, he stood up and he walked off and he just went poof. He was gone. So when I hear stories like that, I go, is that something different than what I've seen? Or is that the same thing? Or is it some people are capable of seeing it this way and others are capable of seeing it that way?
Okay.
Is it like a sixth sense kind of thing? Like why can some people see it this way and others see it another way? No differently than like when I hear psychics and psychic mediums go around the house, or clairvoyants, and they go, okay, I see a man standing over here. He looks like he's 35 and no one else in the room can see them. But then again, I question a lot of people because I don't believe that there's as many clairvoyant psychic mediums out there as what proclaim to be. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I know I follow some, but I don't necessarily believe it. Now there's some that I go, okay, there's something to that. And I know there's something to this person. They're clearly seeing something that I can't. But then my next question is, why is there times that I can see these things? And why is it when I turn that off after I went to church that I didn't see anything for 15 years?
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
You know, a thing that I'm scared of when I go to the Hinsdale is, and I've never had this experience my entire life. I've never been nauseous or sick or any of that stuff. And Jess and I, we went on a ghost tour in Wilmington, North Carolina. This is when we was on vacation. This was, I don't know, many years back. And I was excited because not only is it a ghost tour, but it's history. They're telling history. I'm like, man, this is so cool. And we're going to these shops and they're telling the story about how this person shot this person and now they believe this area is haunted. And we listened to like 3 of these and I'm into it. I'm like, man, this is awesome.
Wow.
And we're walking to this 4th location and I started getting nauseous. And I thought it was so odd, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know, it could be that I didn't eat something that agreed with me. Cause I think we'd had like nacho chips or something, like maybe an hour before that or something. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, is that? So I told Jess, I said, hey, go ahead and go on. And, you know, I'm going to lean back here a little bit. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, if I get sick, like I don't want to get sick in front of everyone. So I'd rather them be doing their thing. And, but then she walked back up to me. She goes, hey, the tour guide just said that people that are sensitive, they get sick at this location, but once they walk about 15 yards that way, they'll be fine.
Oh.
And I'm hearing this and I go, well, that doesn't make no sense. And lo and behold, we walked probably 15 yards and I was fine, completely fine. But they said the reason,
something, it could be underground.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's what doesn't make sense. But the way he explained it was the reason that he believes sensitive people get sick there is that was right there on the shoreline. So when boats would come into Wilmington, if there was a pirate or if there was a mutiny on a boat, they would bring them to the courthouse and they would hang them on sight. And he said there was thousands of hangings of the most evil, diabolical people that probably existed in Wilmington. And those negative energies he believed was ingrained in that land. Which takes me back, you know, to the story of Thomas Whaley. I'm sure you've heard of the Whaley House. There was a gentleman that was hung on the exact property that Thomas Whaley built his house on. So maybe that energy ingrains in the land. I don't know how it works. Like a lot of people goes, well, you have a lot of opinions. And I'm like, that's all I can have because I can't prove or disprove any of it.
Right.
But I look for patterns.
Yes. That's about all that we have is the pattern game. I was always told years ago at places of work that life is a game. You're not supposed to take it too serious because you just drive yourself crazy, especially with work. And I think that I think that I've slowly realized it's a game, but I don't like saying it's a game. But it seems like when, you know, with the paranormal, what you just said just nails it right on the head. And that is all that we can do, because we can't say anything with scientific certainty because we don't have it and the science isn't behind us. So the patterns, yes. I mean, that's all that it seems like we have to play with. And repetition, it almost goes, you know,
But I wish I could understand why some people's able to unlock certain things and some people are not. And, you know, like I am the first one to say, I don't know what I have. I don't know what capabilities I have. I don't know that I have any capabilities, but I would have dreams in the past too, or some people might say visions of things that would happen later.
Okay.
And with startling accuracy, that's the thing that always tripped me out. So when I would hear people that would have similar capabilities, when they would do other things, I'm like, well, I don't have that. Why is that? Why are they able to do the same thing as me in this regard, but I can't do what they can do in this other regard? And I think that's why I'm constantly looking, or I'm constantly listening to stories, or I'm trying to figure out the what. Here's a great example. I had I call it a dream. It could have been a vision. I don't know. But I woke up the next morning and I told Jess, my wife, I said, hey, tell your mom, don't buy that house. It's got black mold in it. And she was like, oh, okay. And nobody knew that anyone was looking for a house or not. We had no clue. And like a week went by and she goes, hey, where did you get that whole looking at house and black mold thing? And I said, I don't know. Like I just had a thought process. And she goes, it wasn't my mom. It was my dad. And he was looking at a house. I didn't know anything about it, but they did the inspection and it had black mold in it.
It just came to you.
And I have it. Yeah.
Yes.
But for me, like there's other people that tell these stories but they have all these other things that I don't have. And I'm like, gosh, like that would be so cool to have, but it doesn't explain why they can do it and I can't. Or, is it something that I'm unlocking? But then, you tell people this stuff and they look at you like you're crazy. And that's why I'm very reserved with the stories that I tell. Like there's so many stories I could tell, but people would be like, man, you're a liar, or you're, whatever, a charlatan, or, and that's, I think, why a lot of people don't tell certain stories. You know what I mean? Because there's so many fakes.
Yeah. The people that have these quote unquote gifts, which I believe I have something similar to what you had just described. Like I will know if somebody's going to come over that I haven't seen for 20 years. And I just know they're going to be there. And 10 minutes later, they show up.
Yeah. Like what is that?
What is that?
Yeah.
And I have
it. Doesn't make sense.
But it's cool, but it doesn't make sense. But a lot of people say that where we think that they have a gift, they call it a curse because it's more bad than it is. I don't believe it's evil, a devil curse. I don't think that it's to that degree, but it must be straining and strenuous on the body that you're, that like Tanis, I forget his first name, but he had written a book and he was at the Dandy House, and to be able to have that type of that ability, it was so draining on the man that he had to sit down because he would fall down if he didn't sit down, because that ability took so much out of him. So I stopped questioning myself as to why I have what I have. I've only told a few people that I have what you were just to some degree what you were just talking about. I don't, because it's too hard to explain. But then
it is hard to explain.
They find that they also have some degree of an ability, but it's not equal to yours, but they can do something else. So are we all intertwined in the mass of how many universes are they saying we have now? I lost count.
They say that there's 9 different dimensional planes that science knows. So we're on the bottom of 9. So whereas we look up and we don't see anything, The way they explain it is like a one-way mirror. So anyone that's above our plane can look down and see us. So that's why I think that if there is something like UFOs or ghosts, their plane is above us and they can look down and go, okay, there's that, but we can't look up. I think they have to merge those dimensional planes so as that we can interact.
Yeah, and if that happens, I don't know if our science will do it. I bank on the others. Maybe
Correct.
Bigfoot.
That's the other thing when they talk about
people. Don't
that's the
believe
other
it.
thing when we talk about Hinsdale. A lot of people said that they believe there's cryptid at Hinsdale also.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least with the things that I have heard and what has been described. I've never seen it, but the noises that you will hear when I was there not long ago, I think it was in 23, the noises that were heard outside of an upstairs bedroom window. And when you listen to the camera from the kitchen, which is on the first floor, near the back door, which doesn't close very well, you can hardly hear the sound, which was described as monkey screeching at 3 a.m. It might not be cryptid, but horrifying nonetheless. But at like 3 a.m, and it was not heard as well. I kind of did what you're discussing doing the hard way. I had to go to the kitchen camera and then go to that same time and then listen to that camera. And yes, you could hear it, but it was real low volume. And then the cameras that were upstairs and closest to that room, you could hear it as plain as day. And then it moves from Laura's window over to Paul's window, and he was in Mary's room. And he had said that it sounded like it was in the room with him. Tires squealing upstairs in Clara's room, bizarre music that a genre that I have never heard in my life. And I heard them all, almost, except for something from Bangladesh or wherever, something like that. The stuff that you hear there, it's a crapshoot, but I have heard the cryptids, and I've heard there's another one that Dan has said they're like little people. I don't know what they're called, but they're apparently naughty. Wendigos?
Wendigos? Wendigo.
I guess they want to lure you into the woods. They throw like this sand or something in your eyes. I don't know if you've heard this, but one of them likes to throw something in your eyes when you get close enough after they've got you close enough to the woods. And that was very suspicious because that same night that we heard the screeching monkeys, when Paul looked out of the window, there was something, a person, entity, I don't know, walking toward the woods. And of course, we got our pants on, if you will, and we ran downstairs, went outside. Guess where it was leading us? To the woods. But of course, we didn't see it, but when we got down there, but he saw it out the window. So, yeah.
Somebody who has a fascinating theory on all of this, the OG is what I would call it, is Kelly.
Oh, yes.
I would definitely talk to Kelly about her theories. And I think it's very well processed. Like she's put a lot of research into this, but I found it absolutely fascinating. I'm not going to steal her thunder by saying on my podcast, but definitely reach out to her. I would almost see if you guys could bring her on your guys' show and then talk about it. She's put a lot of thought into it. I'm like, man, that's genius. And it almost fits exactly.
Was she there at the last event? I think we had Picnic like Claris. Okay. So we're talking about the same Kelly. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. I didn't realize that.
Fascinating theory. Fascinating. And, Kelly's one of those, she kind of leans in the background. But when I heard it, I was like, man, she thought it through. I'm like, that's not and I'm still trying to understand mythology and different kinds of creatures and cryptids. And I don't know where my belief system goes into all that.
Yeah.
But it's like everything else. Like, I don't know where to fit. I don't know what boxes to put things into and what boxes don't belong. You know what I'm saying? So,
right. Well, I don't know anyone who really does. So I don't think it's not a shortcoming or anything. It's the problem that's out there.
The thing. You have, I always say that, I think it was, what's her name? Weidman. What is her name?
Is she a psychic?
Yes.
Oh, she sees dead people.
Yes.
Okay. I can't.
She's
Marianne?
No. She works with Jack Osborne now.
Okay. I don't know that name, but
I can't remember. She's really, really big. If not that she would ever watch my little podcast, but if she ever did, I apologize. I'm sorry. But she had a theory that I'd never heard before. And I go, that is genius. And I don't know why I ever didn't think about it. And the way she explained it is, I believe she said that she went to Africa or it was another country. And she was talking to other psychic mediums. It was like, do you see X, Y, and Z? And she couldn't see it. And she's like, that's very weird because in the States, I can see all these different things. And when they explained what it was a creature. So like a prime example, some people might say there's a thing such as a shade or a demon or some other type of, they might be all kind of the same thing, but it's almost like a different variation of that.
Oh.
And she could never see this thing. And then she started reading and doing research. And as she grew knowledge on it, she could slowly start seeing it. So she had a theory that if you don't have that energy capability, you're not going to see it anyway. And I'm like, I've never thought of that, but that's, as crazy as everything else sounds, I don't think it's far-fetched.
Yeah.
Katrina, Weirdman. Her last name starts with a W.
Okay. I can look that
but
up.
She's like one of two people I follow on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm not big on Instagram, but I think I have an account, so let's put it that way. But that sounds
interesting
good.
Theory. Yeah, interesting theory. I love hearing different people's theories and observations, and that's why I think what you do is so important because you provide all this footage for people to do their own investigation, to come up with their own theories. I think that's genius.
Well, thank you. While you were saying that, it dawned on me that it sounds as though some people are going to be able to see what they can see, and some people can see what they see, but they might not see what somebody else sees. That's true. So interesting. In the same video, we should all hear the same thing, I would think, but the seeing and witnessing things, like when somebody tells me that they see this dark mass going across, I just don't have the dice to see it. So you've not
learned enough.
Right.
Maybe it's something you see eventually. Yeah.
Right. Like the lady who does the ghost whisperer. I can't remember her name, but she was in the movie, I guess, or helped produce it or something. And apparently people are born with things, and then in other instances you have to work at it to gain to get to that level. So
correct.
That's just like a job then.
Well, it's like demonologists too, right? Like, I don't know how many demonologists and books you've read on demonology and stuff of that equivalent, but like there was a guy that I absolutely love. He's passed away now, but his name was Derek Perrence, and he's wrote many books, and he told a very fascinating story about a demon. And he said that he had helped exorcise a demon. He wasn't the main priest. He was just the demonologist that was working the case. And all these years went by, and he was in Africa. He was working with a tribe. And when he was working with the tribe, they had talked about this guy that had this demon in him. And he was fascinated because he's like, I wonder what the difference is between the demons in the States versus here. And, you know, he thought maybe it was different. And he went and he's talking to this guy, and he said all of a sudden, as soon as he pulled out his Bible and started talking, this thing became very violent. He goes, oh, well, that's very weird, because in Africa, that tribe didn't know anything about Jesus or the Bible or, you know, any of this biblical stuff. But he found that the fact that there was an adverse reaction to that, he found that very fascinating. And one of the ways that you defeat a demon is by revealing its name and then calling it by name. So he's trying to pull this information. He said the demon looked at him and smiled through the guy's face. So it's not like he sees the demon, but through the guy's face. And he says, do you not remember me? And the guy, Derek Prince, goes, how would I remember you? And he goes, I was this demon that you exorcised X amount of years ago from this gentleman. And he said, he told the demon, he goes, you wasn't there, like you don't know. And he said the guy told him in English, he's in Africa. Yeah. In English, he's telling him about an experience that he helped exorcise that was in another country from like 10 years previous. And then you sit there and you go, where does that come from? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's not something that can be answered on Earth.
Correct.
So I will go with that until to my grave, that I know that that is true. But everything that it entails, I think, is way too much for. It's too much for one person's mind to wrap around it all. I mean, with I think Bigfoot, is why, you know.
I think that's why we need all these communities, though, and all of those communities have to work together. You know, that's like what I told Paul when we all started working together. You know, we're all trying to, well, I can't say all, but most of us are all trying to achieve the same thing. Those of us that are searching, not creating entertainment, right? Like, I've been blessed. I understand that I tell a story and that my stories can be on the cuff of what's there and not. I try to present the most accurate story I can. But sometimes there's things that can be fabricated. Like, there's no true way of knowing. That's why I want to step into investigations. And I've been blessed. There's 9,000 of you that watch me on YouTube. And that blows my mind. That absolutely blows my mind that 9,000 people's like, I want to watch this. But then the hundreds of thousands of downloads I get to all of you that listen on wherever you listen, Apple, Spotify. I ran into one of my shows on Amazon the other day. I'm like, I didn't even know it's on Amazon. Like, how does this happen?
No.
But, you know, I was fascinated by that. But, you know, the big thing that I want my viewers to do, and I ask no matter where you're at, whether you're listening, whether you are watching on the YouTube machine, please, 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 I want you all to go to Link's YouTube channel. And I want you to hit the subscribe button, and I want you to watch some of the things that he's doing. I'm going to, in the description down below, you're going to be able to get the link to go see what it is that Link does. And I just want you to just watch. I just want you to look. I want you to click. And Link, is there anywhere else they can find your stuff at?
I do share it to Paul Kenyon's The Haunted Dandy House. The Dandy House on his Facebook page. I think he's renamed it the Real Dandy House on Facebook, but you can find that on his also. He wanted some of my content on his Facebook page, so I don't have X up and running yet, but I do post there sometimes, but I don't have that up and running yet, but that's soon and in the works, because it seems like a lot of people like to click on paranormal in many other forms other than just YouTube. So
yeah, for sure. I definitely think you have to have YouTube to a degree, but yeah, there's definitely so many places that people, like I talk to people on Reddit all the time that they couldn't even tell me anything about any of my stuff, but we have these ghost conversations on Reddit. I mean, I've got my own forums on Reddit where it's separate from everything else. So definitely do me a favor though. Check out Link. I would definitely love to see Link get a few more subscribers as well as a few more clicks, and who knows, maybe down the road, maybe we can get together with Link and Paul both, and we can all have some more conversations. I think that would be fascinating. In addition to all of that, I will say that I will add Link's stuff in the description. I'll add Paul's Facebook site also. So if you want to check out what Link's doing over on Paul's site. But this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, Link. I think this is probably one of the more fun interviews I've done, to be able to talk through and kind of tell stories back and forth. I think that's been great. Is there anything you want to tell the masses of people?
Oh, they just have to keep exploring. They have to, as I always say, stay spooky, but it's not stay spooky, but it's there. And I think the more that a person accepts it, or at least the possibility that it's there, they will see what they have been missing. And it's not the devil. It's could be your grandmother. It could be your mother. It could be a relative that is trying to say something to you. It's not like what Hollywood would make it out to be, that it's all evil and things like that. It can be very positive. So keeping that in mind, that's why I'm trying to, helping to spread the word, like so many.
Absolutely. You heard it here first.
Yes.
Spooky news with Link. That's how I'll put it. Well,
I do
everybody,
want to thank you for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. I almost had to hog tie Link and bring him in here. I didn't think I was ever going to get him here.
You did. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Until we see you on the next podcast, wherever you're listening, goodbye.